Okay, so what I want to take a look at right now is how do you go about creating paintings in Photoshop. And what I have here right now are two paintings in progress. I'm going to show you how to get started on a third painting. So here we begin with this one right in here. And what you can see is that if I start to turn the layers off, that there are these different layers here. Um, and really it begins with just a drawing, an outline of the drawing, and definitely a middle value and more of that. And then coming in, working with the brushes, starting to apply color. Um, and there we have it. Now, let's actually take a look at this one right in here and see how we would go about doing this. And I'm zoomed in. I have this all kind of this overall sketch of it. Now I'm coming in and adding color. So, but how do we begin with the first sketch? So let's actually come to this new piece and take a look. All right, so what I would say to do first is let's actually check the size of this. Let's check the image size. And it's actually pretty low resolution. So what I want to do first is I want to make this more of a higher resolution image because it's going to be a painting. So if I come on in here and I come to image canvas size, I'm going to hit cancel. Actually, I'm going to open this up new. File, new. I'm going to set this to be a bigger piece. So I've made the width, the resolution 300 and the width 18 by 24. So I hit OK. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create a new layer. Now I'm going to place my image in. So I come to File, Place, and I'm going to go find that image that I have, and it is in Projects in Progress, and it's in Photos, and it's one of these ones. Okay, hold on for 1 minute. Okay. All right, so here we go. Place. All right, I can see it here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to make this much bigger. First thing I want to do is I'm going to rotate. I'll place it to begin with. I'm going to rotate my canvas. So I come to Image, Image Rotation, 90 degrees. Okay, now I can grab this guy and I want to pull this out. I'm going to flip them. And again, I can come on in here and see I'm almost at 180. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to make him bigger. So I'm going to shift and pull. Now you can see my image is getting very pixelated, but what probably should happen, I want to hold down, shift at the corner, and pull out from the side. What should happen is when I when I place it, it shouldn't be so bad. So let's see, when I place it, place. Okay, then you can see that it's actually not that bad. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it fill up this canvas. And even if it changes it a little bit, so be it. I can always crop it at the end. Let's make it a tiny bit bigger so it all fits. Now with this image too, if it gets a little bit warped, it doesn't really matter 100%, although, All right, so we hit apply. Now, what can I do next? Well, if I would like to, I could create a new layer, and I'm going to come into this layer right here, and I'm going to lower the opacity a bit, come down to about maybe 70%. I'm going to come to this layer where my image is. I'm going to lock that layer, and I'm going to work on this layer above here. Now, I want to have this background layer with the white fill so that I can see what I'm doing. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come on over into here, and I want to select, I'm going to just go for a gray. You can really choose whatever you want to. And now I'm going to start to sketch over top of this. Now, you could draw it freehand if you'd like. You can also go about and use your picture as a guide to pretty much trace over top of it. Now, as I look at this, I want to just do one thing. I want to move this up a little bit like this. because I like change my composition up a little bit. I'm going to end that right there. And here goes. Again, I'm going to lock this one. I'm going to show you how I'd go about doing this. Now, definitely starting by zooming in. Okay. Now, the keyboard shortcuts, the ones I'm going to be using here are the brush. The keyboard shortcut is the letter B, and the hand, the keyboard shortcut is the letter H, and the eyedropper. Well, I won't be using the eyedropper yet, but so those will be my big ones. And a lot of times you won't see me going back to the toolbar. I'm just going to be using B for brush, H for hand. So I'm going to pull this over. Actually, I can't. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit here. Okay. And what I want to do now is I am going to work on this top layer, and I'm going to start to trace. Okay, so I got my brush. Now all I want to have when I do this really is 2 to 3 pixels. That's it. I'm going to say 2 pixels, and I'm gonna zoom in. I'm doing Apple plus for that. And you know, whatever, if you're on a PC, it'll be a little bit different. So I'm going to zoom in. Actually, maybe I'll go up a little bit. Let's say. All right, so here we go. So I come on in. I can start tracing around this. I probably know what I'm going to up this brush a little bit. I'm going to go to, let's go to 4 pixels. And then we'll be able to see it a little bit better. Okay, now I can see it. Now I'm zoomed in really close. It's kind of hard to see what's going on, but we can click, we can just start dragging around. Now I come in, I'm going to grab my hand, start moving around. I come back to my brush. So what you can see is I can come in, I'm in very, very close. But I'm coming back and forth from my hand down. And just moving around here. My toolbar is totally in my little tool panel is totally in my way. But really coming around, moving around here. All right, I'm going to zoom in. Let's just take a quick look. We just did a tiny little bit here. So I can keep turning this off and seeing, okay, this is what I have done so far. All right, so it's just a very beginning. I'm going to pause my video, and I'm going to work on this. Actually, let me just let you see one more time how I'm going about doing this. I'm zooming in really close. Now this image actually has quite a bit of detail to it, okay? But what I'm doing here is I'm zoomed in. I have my brush. And you know, you might not even want to zoom in this much. I like zooming in. And then you're just really looking at the shapes. And again, what's great when you're zoomed in so close, if you just come and you grab the hand and then go back to the brush, you can just keep on moving along. All right, so keep on moving. And again, what we're doing here, this is really just going to be our outline. I can see that's probably a nice little shadow in there. And then what we'll do from here is we'll go on in and we'll start adding all of our color. All right, so I'm not going to hit pause because I just thought how I have this other one of these done. But again, just coming in, just kind of outlining everything that you have. I'm going to zoom it on in again. And you can see, you know, how this would take more time, but how we're starting to get a drawing now. If I come on over to this one, I can see that I have the drawing started. There's my outline. Now, when I come into this one, to the branches, I can also see how I have this one started. Now, what I've done here is I've moved my drawing. I'm going to move this back so you can see how up. So I think you get the sense, right? How eventually then I just moved this up but you can see how this one started in a similar fashion. Now, the next step after you get your painting outline would be to go in and paint. Now, before I do that, let's just take a look at the paint brushes. All right, so we come on in. I'm just going to go File. I'm just going to create a new file. This will just be to experiment and look at how these paint brushes look and work. Now, what we could do is we have a couple different brushes. We could hit Brush. And we get this little guy right here. And we also can open this one up. We have, actually it's right there. We have brush and we have brush presets. So when I grab my brush, let's just start with the plain brush. I could put my opacity up. I have this color, this gray color right in here. I'm going to up my brush. All right, so we come on in and we have our paintbrush. Okay, now I could lower the opacity of this. I come in and say, there it is with the opacity lowered. Now I'm going to up this brush a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, here it is, with the opacity lowered. Okay, now watch this with the brush too. As we come over top of it, it starts to get darker, even when I up the opacity to 100%. So say I come in and my opacity is at 100%, I'm going over top of this. Now, but when I come over top this way, it adds to the darkness of it. So we can up our brush. Now we can also come in here. I'm going to up this a little bit more, and we can lower the hardness. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So when we lower the hardness, see how that has more of this blurred edge to it. We put the hardness at, say, this. Okay, it has a little bit of a different look to it. Now we lower the opacity. Just went over this. The flow. If we lower the flow, what we're going to find is that it won't come out as quickly. It's like not having as much paint on your brush. Okay, so that is with the flow. Now there are these different pieces too. We could click this for enables an airbrush mode. Okay, and you can experiment with that a little bit. And this one right here has to do with when you're working with a bamboo, a drawing tablet. These ones in here have to do with the tablet pressure. Now, you can come on in and let's actually pick one more interesting. Let's pick a color. Pick a color, any color. Let's have a color. Ooh, not so wild about that color. Okay, so we can choose a color. And what we can see is we can do a bunch of different things as we come on in. Now, when we hit our brush presets too, we can see we have these ones, and I have this brush in here. I like that brush. Okay, so that brush has that kind of feel to it. Now what you'll find too is if you come on in and you don't have all these brushes, Photoshop has a bunch of brushes that it just has in a default, and here they are right in here. So if you wanted to add, let's say I wanted to add my drop shadow brushes, I would just click. Hold on. All right, I have replace. Actually, I'm gonna hit cancel. Let me try one that I don't have. I have a lot of brushes loaded in here. Hold on. All right, so if I click. All right, and I say that I want, let's get wet media brushes. And I'll say, yes, we want to append. We want to append them, and then what we're going to find is that those brushes will appear at the very end, and these look to be the wet media brushes, because I don't believe I had those ones in before. Usually the brushes that you add will come in at the end. All right, so I'm going to click on to this one. This one is loaded with 5 pixels. We'll up this, and we can see too, you can get that over here also. All right, so we come back to this brush in here, and I've loaded up the wet media brush, and we can see that, we can come in. Let's grab our brush. All right, and that's actually what that brush looks like. Okay, so I could up it a little bit so we could see it a little bit better. All right, now what happens if we, let's see, I think I want to put my hardness up. Has a little bit of a different feel to it. Now let's say that we want to do scattering. What happens when we do that? All right, when I undo that, this is what it looks like. Okay, so now really, Photoshop is all based on pixels. So you can see actually, this is actually what that brush looks like when I up the spacing. Hardness is down in here also. Let's say, if you did something like color dynamics, Okay, there's a bunch of different things you can play around with in here. Wet edges. Okay, and we always get this little preview down below. You might need to zoom in to even really see that. But again, we can experiment and see what we come up with and what happens. And those are the options. And sometimes to really see what happens, we'll have to zoom it on in and we can see how this one has that little bit of a different edge to it. Okay, so the big things though that we're going to work with, and we're going to come back and say, okay, so now that we have this one all done, how do we go about painting it? All right, well, I'm going to come on in here. We'll take a closer look at this one down below. Keep zooming on in. Okay, so we can see we have a couple different colors, greens. When we zoom out, this is what we see. So now I'm going to come on into this one right in here and just do this one real quick. I'm going to come in, I'm going to sample with my eyedropper, open up my layers. And I don't necessarily need that big brush thing. I'm going to put my layers on over so I can see what I'm doing. Now I have a layer for the green. Okay, I have a layer for the green. And definitely when I was coming and do my background, right? How would I do my background? Well, just to talk about that for a minute, I would actually come in, take a layer. This would be my background layer. BACKGROUND. All right, so now it would be behind everything, right? So I could just come in very easily right into here and say I sampled this color, I put this color up on top, and I grabbed my brush and I came on down to here. See, if I was to just come on in, see, that's actually behind. It might be hard to tell, but it actually is totally behind it. Actually, and even if I came down in here, we'd be able to see it better. See how that's behind? Okay, and it's behind because of the way the layers are set up. Okay, all right, so let's actually go about how would I go about, I'm going to come into my history and turn that last piece off, but the background would probably be something that I would do at the very end. Okay, so here goes. So I'm going to come on in, I'm in my green layer. I always want to make sure that I'm in my right layer. I'm going to lock that one. I'm in my green layer, and I'm going to come on in and I'm going to work with this color in here. So what I'm going to do actually is I want to sample this color from right over here. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper. I'm going to put this one right up on the top, and I'm just going to begin coming in and just painting this area. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to come back to my brush. I want to, lower my brush, come down into there, and I'm just going to come in. I'm just going to actually just make it green to start. Now I'm working with a different brush. And it's got that, this is the wet media brush that I have here. It's kind of interesting looking. So I'm just coming on in, I'm just painting it in. All right, so now I have we could say this is our local color. And now I'm going to come on in, I'm going to look again, and I'm going to say, all right, where are my shadows? Where are my highlights? And I might actually maybe be better served if I came in here and I had this image printed and I had it right in front of me. But of course, if I had it right in front of me, you all wouldn't be able to see it. So what I want to do here is I'm going to come on over. I want to just actually, and I can even just double click this, right? I want to get a little bit darker. So I'm going to say right in there, perfect. So I'm going to come back to my brush. I'm going to zoom it on in, and I have a shadow on the side. And again, I really do want to have that picture as my reference. I'm going to lower this down, let's say to 5 pixels. And I'm going to start coming on in and saying, there's the shadow on the side. Let me zoom it on in a little bit. Okay, just coming on in. Adding some of this shadow in. And actually what I might want to do too is lower the opacity so it sits over top of this. And starts to add a little bit more detail. All right, so now let's say that I came on in here, I got another color. And I'm going to change my brush from the one that I have to a more, just like a normal brush. I'll have that edge like this. And I'm going to come on in, maybe even up it a little bit. And then coming on in. Adding some more detail, some more information. All right, so now let's say that we had some highlights. We come on in, go for some lighter colors. I can see, even like over in here. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's not, and we don't even want it to look exactly like the photo, right? Because that actually doesn't make it as interesting. It's a painting of a photograph. I can come back in over in here, kind of lighten this all up a little bit, and then continue on. So I think you get the idea. I could go through and really get this whole thing completed, choosing my different colors. Let's say, how would I go about doing this one? Well, in a similar way, finding out what color I want, going in, laying in maybe the local color, putting in the shadows and the highlights. So there we have it. We can see we can get a lot of different detail with this, and there's a lot of people doing paintings with Photoshop who have some extremely detailed, beautiful imagery. Thanks so much.